everyone, I am Marie Walker, the director of the Anime Ivester Education Center here at the Northeast Georgia History Center. And today I'm going to take you through getting dressed in a robe a la Française, which is a fancy French way of saying a French dress. This dress was popular in the 1700s, so the 18th century. It was popular really peaked in the 1760s and remained popular until the 1780s. We are going to be showing you getting dressed in a later silhouette of it today. So this silhouette would be more popular in the 1780s because we are using a false rump instead of panniers or pocket hoops, which went out of favor in the 1760s and 1770s. Remember, this style of dress was popular throughout most of the 1700s. It evolved from the mantra, which was popular in the late 1600s and early 1700s. Fashion is moving much slower than it does in our very fast fashion world, where there's just a new trend every week, where they're trying to get you to buy something else. These dresses would have been made by hand. It takes a really long time and a lot of money for fabric. Therefore, we're going to keep these items and you are going to be using them for a very long time. So fashion, while there might be slight variations that change, is going to relatively stay the same for a much longer period of time. This is pre-First Industrial Revolution, and therefore fashion is very slow. Fashion only picks up after the Industrial Revolution, picks up again after the Second Industrial Revolution, because clothing, weaving, sewing all gets easier to make after those things. But here we are in the 1700s with our slow fashion. I am wearing already my foundational layers that I am then going to build my dress upon. I like to think of dresses, especially in this time period, as architecture made of fabric, or fabric architecture. So, of course, you have to have your foundation layers that you can then build off of. So I have my shift, which is closest to my body. I have my stays, and then I also have my stockings that you can see here. So starting off with the layer closest to my skin is my shift. It is a linen shift. It is basically two big rectangles of fabric sewn to two smaller rectangles of fabric, which are my sleeves. It then has gussets under the arm, which are diamond-shaped pieces of fabric, which allow me to have movement. And then I also have gussets on the side, which allow for movement of my legs. But other than that, it's pretty much just a lot of rectangles. And then a few triangles and a diamond. On top of my shift I have closest to my body to protect me, well, really to protect my dress from sweat, from body odor. I don't want to have to wash this dress. It's a lot of fabric. It's really nice. Washing it is not the preferred option, but washing my very versatile, very plain linen shift, much easier. Much rather do that. I can have a couple of these and wash that and save a lot on time laundering my outer dress. I also want to protect my body from my stays. Now, stays do not hurt you. I don't mean that in a literal sense of protecting, but it's nicer to have just a little bit of floof, that your body is not going to have like markings from the stays, because you have like a little bit of padding between you and the stays, so it's not going to like rub on your body. You have this nice soft layer next to your body instead of your stays. But your stays are really important. I can still move in them. I can bend over. I can almost touch my toes. I mean, I can't touch my toes in real life. That has nothing to do with the stays. But you can do physical activity in stays. Stays are the pre-runner to what we would call a corset. A corset has more of an hourglass shape. In the 1700s, 1600s, 1500s, they have more of a V shape or a cylinder shape. It's not really about shaping the body as much. It's more about support. Well, it's still a little bit about shaping the body, but the really attractive shape in this time is a triangle. And that's what you can see these stays are doing here, is making me into a V. but they're also about support. So they're going to support my torso, they're supporting my bosom, and because this is the bra of the century. So society ladies would wear stays. Working women would also wear stays because you want to be supported even when you're doing work, manual labor. Now, there are going to be slight variations in these stays. They might not be as heavily boned if you're doing working stays versus if you're going to wear fancy stays. I would consider these to be fancy stays because they're pretty well boned. They have nice little tabs. Working stays would have those too. These tabs allow for hip movement, so I got hips, and these tabs, instead of being just, very constraining here on the hips, it has tabs which allow for movement of the hips. They, can be pulled out or kind of pushed in. So it allows for some flexibility in the body here. And also you can put your skirts under to hold if needed, which some people do. But these, as I said, are pretty stays. They're not necessarily working stays, and that's because they are laced in the back, as you can see here. So they are laced in a spiral notion. A lot of times we see crisscrossing lace of stays where they make an X formation, but that wasn't a thing until the 1800s. In the 1700s, going back, you're going to have spiral lace stays, spiral lace gowns. It's going to be this, which is just an interesting way of doing things. It would be just one cord, spiral laced, medieval, spiral laced, Renaissance, spiral laced, 1600s, well, that is Renaissance. It's all spiral laced. It doesn't become crisscrossy until the 1800s. Oh, just a little interesting lacing tidbit for you there. Working stays would probably lace up the front so that the person could do them themselves. I cannot lace myself into this in the back, especially with a spiral lace version of this. It's rather impossible. But if I were to have a front lacing one, I can do that myself. That's the difference between having a maid that can help you get dressed and being a working woman who does not have such luxuries. So that's a little bit about the stays here. Sometimes they have shoulder straps, sometimes they don't. There are different variations of stays that are popular throughout the 1700s while maintaining mostly a very similar V shape. Now I'm going to start getting dressed. So first, after my foundational layers, I'm going to have another foundational layer, and that is my split rump. Split rumps became more popular in the 1770s and 1780s. In the 1790s, you go to a slimmer silhouette. But right now, as we are getting dressed in the 1780s, we are using the false rump. I like the false rump a little bit better than what you might call panniers or pocket hoops, which is what you see a lot on what you would quote or call quote-unquote Marie Antoinette dresses, which are very popular in the 1760s and the 1770s. And those are just like, if you have a grand pannier or pocket hoops, they are just out to the side. And they can get really, really, really wide. So wide hips were the thing. When you get to a split rump or a false bum, they become still wide, but centered more towards the back because of the rump. So it shifts from being really wide and just straight out from the sides to wide, but shifting a little bit more to the back. So that's what I have here is my false rump. It's basically just two pillows strapped to my hips with a fabric and some ribbon. And then it goes over my shift and my stays. Now I can I'm going to put those under that tab there. There we go. So the false rumps or split rumps can be kind of large, but usually they're going to be smaller than panniers, almost definitely smaller than panniers or pocket hoops. And they are supposed to be done to where they are there's a mathematical equation to where they are in proportion to your body for fashion reasons. So they aren't going to be too small or too big. Of course, that would also vary depending upon your socioeconomic status. Poorer women who are working might wear smaller versions. They might not wear these at all. They might wear just a false bum that goes all the way around, a bum pad that's not a large split rump. They might just wear one. So there's a lot of different versions of rumps, of bums going around in the later 18th century, which kind of are happening at the same time. There's not necessarily a set progression. All right, so after this, I'm going to go and I'm going to put on my pocket. So my pocket is going to go over my false rump. I'm going to tie it here on this side. I don't want to tie a lot of things right here in the front because then that puts a lot of bulk there and I don't want that. So I'm going to tie it here on this side. If it adds a little extra to where my bum is, that's a good thing. But there we are, that is my pocket. And my petticoats are going to be split so I can get into it. And here, down the split center, I can get into it. I can fit so many things in here. It is a giant pocket. Wish we had these still today in our clothes, but alas, us ladies usually have smaller pockets. And this is one that I made. I made it in 2020 because usually, historically, you might put the date on it. And I thought, how fun, I'm going to put the year I actually made it instead of saying, you know, it's from 1780 or something. Because this was the first one I made. And I used my embroidery machine. So I did not do all of this by hand. Instead, I had a machine that did it. And I programmed the machine to do it. But I programmed it to look very much like one that would be done by hand in the 18th century. I have a floral design going around the split here. Nice vines and flowers that are red, blue, and then green for the flower, the leaf vine part, and that goes around the slit. And then at the bottom here, I have a larger floral design, again in the same colors. So it's very common to have a smaller floral design on the sides, and then a larger floral design at the bottom. And then I have my initials and the year, which are here, which is very much like the one I was basing it off of that I had searched at museums. That's very common to do. All right, so now I have my stockings, my shift, my stays, my split bum, and my pocket. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers already, and we haven't even gotten to the dress yet. But we're about to. So next we have the petticoat. Now an interesting thing is they did not call these skirts, even if it's seen and worn over the top. But the word for skirt really had not come to be used for what we would consider a skirt today. Today we would consider this a skirt, but in the time period it would be called a petticoat, even though it is a petticoat that is seen. Now you can wear numerous petticoats. That's been a thing that people have done throughout history, wearing various petticoats for warmth, for modesty, for protection if you're, going out. But this one, I just have this one petticoat. So if I were to have, usually you would wear a petticoat under this. I don't really think I need one, because usually you would wear another petticoat to smooth out the lines of your dress, because you don't want them to be seen, and to have a fuller silhouette. For that reason, to have a fuller silhouette, I might need one. I don't think I need one to smooth out the lines here. This is a very soft silhouette, so I have not found the need for one, but it would be very common. Mostly everyone would, for modesty, protection, and warmth, which would be needed, have an under petticoat. I just do not have one made. And that would be the under petticoat. And then this one, which is fancy, would be the over petticoat, which would be seen. And that's why it is red and has trim on it. Now, I did a little costume cheat thing because I ran out of red fabric, so I have just plain fabric. on the back. I don't have any historical accuracy detail account as to if anyone actually ever did this. I would like to think that someone also had the same troubles as me a couple hundred years ago with running out of pretty fabric and then just kind of piecemealing the back. But I don't have a prime example, especially on a robe a la Française, which would be worn by higher class people, showing off their wealth and their amount of fabric that they could afford. But therefore, I am telling you my secrets. And that's just my costume hack. I ran out of fabric, couldn't get more of it. Therefore, this is what we got. I'm going to go ahead and put this on. Ooh. So this, it ties. It ties in the front and the back. Some people tie them to where you tie to the side and tie them to each other. I do not like the fit of that as well for this. So therefore, I tie the back first around my waist. As you can see, I'm pulling it over my false drum here, tying it in the front. And then I'm going to take my front, I'm going to fit it to my waist, and then tie it in the back. All right, so there we are. Oh, I need to pull that down, got caught. There we are. Now you can't really see where the slit is, but it is right here. I can stick my hand down in here. My pocket's on this side, so I can stick my hand through my skirts and get to my pockets. Ooh. You can see there. Ta-da! So it's nice and easy. It's very hidden, and I can store a bunch of stuff down here. All right. Making sure I get all that situated before I put on my stomacher. So here's my stomacher. It goes over my stomach. Does that make sense, right? Stomacher goes over the stomach. And I'm going to pin it to my stays. Another reason why you need stays, not just for support, but they help support the garment. You have to also fasten things, your garment, to the stays. In this time period, women did not use buttons on their clothes. Men used buttons, a lot of buttons, as decoration. But women did not use buttons. They did not use hook and eyes. Zippers had not been invented yet. You used pins. Usually you would have certain type of pins that would be called dress pins that you use, which were different than like sewing needles or pins. But this is I don't have exact recreations of those, so I'm just using these today. All right, I'm gonna make sure I don't want my stays to show, but I also don't want my stomacher to be flapping over my stays, so I'm trying to get it right to where it's right above them so it doesn't show my stays, but still is being very supported by my stays. I'm just going to go through. I like to do it at a lateral direction with my pins. I feel like I get poked less that way. So it's not going down. I'm inserting the pin this way with the pointy end towards the front, because that is where I am going to get poked the least. There we go. And then I go through the fabric up to the pin. I go through the fabric to the stays and then back up. So there, it's pinned on one side. Make sure I then pin it on the other side. I like to pin behind the trim. That way the pins don't show. So back, down, and then back up to the front. You can see why people had other people to help them, because this is kind of a difficult angle to be pinning onto oneself. Robe a la Francaises were very much fashionable garments, showing off all the fabric and also all the trim that is also made of the same fabric. So as you can see, my stomacher is trimmed, my petticoat is trimmed, and this is a conservatively trimmed robe a la Française. They can get extremely, extremely elaborate in their trimming. Usually it's almost always the fabric that is the same fabric that the dress is made out of, or it might be a white gauze-like fabric that was also very popular to have on a lighter colored dress. That would be more of a pastel color. You see that a lot. But those are going to be the two main types of trim, is either trim the same as the dress, or you're going to have this white gauze-like fabric that is being trimmed all over it as well. And this is a red taffeta, so it's lots of fun. It's crunches and crinkles when you walk. It's not a sneaky dress. You can't sneak up on anyone, but it is very fun when you're dancing or walking to hear the dress move. Now I have it pinned twice up here. Sometimes I might pin it down at the bottom here, but I'm going to wait, and then I'm just going to pin that when I pin the dress over it as well, so I don't need to have it pinned twice. If I'm going somewhere, like if I'm going to dance or I know I'm going to be doing a lot of movement in this dress, I might secure it more. But for now, while I'm just walking around the studio, I think I will pin it a little looser for today. Alright, so now that I have the stomacher and I have the petticoat on, I am then going to put the dress over it. So this is the robe, the dress that has until now I could be getting dressed in any type of style from the 18th century truly. Because I have bum, I have petticoat, and I have a stomacher. Those are three staple items for the later half of the 1800s for fashion, and would be worn under a robe a la Anglaise, a robe a la Française, Italianate gowns. Well, the petticoat would be. Stomachers on Italianate gowns were not a thing. They had a closing front. But they also had a split rump. Or a robe a la Polonaise. Sometimes they might have a stomacher, sometimes not. But those would have a different type of overdress. All the ones I said there would have a different type of overdress, but had very similar under features. So, the robe a la Française is probably one of the most iconic and, in my opinion, beautiful dresses of the 18th century. It has these beautiful back pleats here, which is so much fabric folded down into such a small amount of space. I hand sewed these pleats because I didn't want them, they needed to be done very finely, and I didn't want a machine to crunch them. I wanted the fabric to be able to move. Also, this entire gown would have been hand sewn if it was made in the 18th century. I do not have the time to usually hand sew everything, so I choose specific parts of the dress to hand sew, so that it still has some of the same movement as it would in the 18th century, but also saves me time. And one of the things that I chose to hand sew on this dress were the pleats, because I wanted the pleats to be able to have life and have movement, and it is one of the focal points of the gown of the robe a la Française. And these are called watteau pleats. This is also called a sacque back or sacque à dos in French. Sacque à dos sounds a little more fancy than a sacque back, just because it's in French and I am an American. But there's just so much fabric in these pleats. It is pleated down 3 different times, which you can kind of see on the edge here. One goes in farther than the other. And then of course there's the actual back of the dress here, which counts as another. So you have back of dress, pleat 1, pleat 2. So three volumes of fabric that really are just quite large. And it's fun. It's like a cape that you just have attached to your dress. I think it's very fun and is one of the fun movement features of the Robe à la Française. Another interesting feature of the Robe à la Française is that since it doesn't really have a true back, it's a sacque back, you have a lot of fabric, you have a lining that is the indicator that is truly the back of your dress that you can then tighten or let out, depending if your body changes or how tight you want the dress to be styled, what you're wearing it over. I think that's just a super cool piece of the dress that it allows for body changes, because these are going to be in style for a really long time. Your body changes over the course of 30 years, but you still might want to keep this dress for 30 years. Therefore, I think that's just a super cool thing about older clothing, is that it's far more versatile to changing bodies than modern clothing is. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put on this dress. I'm going to pull down my shift that got caught up a little bit in the sleeves. You can see it there. Don't want it to be bunched. All right, I'm going to then bring the front of the dress over. Adjust my pleats and my seams. There we go. Ah, yes. Very good. Now I'm going to pin down the dress to the stays. Again, I like to pin under the trim so that it hides the pins. I'm going to pin at the top and at the bottom of my dress. Sometimes you might pin in the midsection here, but I am not going to do such today. All right. Oh no, that one came unpinned. All right, there we go. Did I move and it? Oh, I moved and it came unpinned already. Oh, I didn't catch the second part of it. That's one of the harder parts when you're going through the dress, is that you have to go through a couple layers to actually get to the stays. But you also don't want to poke yourself. There we go. I think that one caught. All right, so now I have my robe, my dress, over my over petticoat and my stomacher, as well as all of my additional underlayers. The robe is also, again, very heavily trimmed. I have small box pleats down the front of my dress, on the bodice, and then on the skirt part, I I have, again, larger box pleats. I wanted to have trim that was scaled to the dress, so I wanted to have smaller box pleats on the bodice, and then the skirt is very big and wide, and really the front of the dress is a canvas for trim, and that's what I wanted to do. So I wanted to have larger amounts of trim, bigger trim on the bottom. Also, the stomacher is just a canvas for trim. That's really the front of this dress. It's just a canvas for trim. On the stomacher, I also have small box pleats. I have them going up in different kind of squiggly motions. The bottom here has a semicircle. On the bodice, on the front here, it kind of goes up and then down, and here again it goes up and then kind of swags and swishes there, as well as on the bottom of my petticoat here. It has the same kind of squiggly motion, and then on the bottom I have a nice big ruffle, which is very common, and you see on almost the bottom of all petticoats that go under Robe a la Françaises. Here you can see the back of my dress and just how poofy it is. Here you see kind of where the waist is, and then you see just the massive amounts of fabric that make up the back of my pleats. So it's quite fashionable. This would be a French court dress. Robe a la Française originated in France. Robe a la Anglaise, or an English dress, of course, originated in England. This would be very, very popular. French court dresses, or French Robe a la Française, was very much inspired in England, and they would also wear that as well. France at this time, it's the 1700s. You have the Sun King kicking off the 1700s with the French. You then have a succession of Louis, some of which were better than others, until you get to the French Revolution. And before the French Revolution, France was a very large world-dominating power, and therefore their politics, their fashion, their food influenced the rest of the world in different ways. And fashion, of course, if you want to be, fashionable, it's the French. We still think of the French as being a very the capital of fashion. Paris has Fashion Week, and being one of the places, the iconic places for fashion. Very similar into the 1700s, was also very a prominent fashion player as well. So more ruffles again here on the sleeves. The sleeves are shorter, and then it has these two ruffles that are attached to the dress. You would then have a lace portion called an engagement that could be whip stitched to the dress, so loosely stitched to the underside of the dress here. But you also want to be able to use them on other garments, so they might not always stay attached to this dress. You might move them to another dress. I do not have those with me today, but they would be worn with this dress. Robe a la Française, they always are a lesser, they are always not long sleeve. They always come to just the elbow, and then if you're going somewhere, you might wear gloves, long gloves with them. Also, you'll notice that there is a very large cleavage area here. In the 1700s, modesty was not thought of as much as it was in the 1800s, because Queen Victoria then came to power in the 1800s. Britain became one of the world's major powers, and of course what Queen Victoria did in the Victorian era, everyone wanted to emulate. Victoria and her husband Prince Albert wanted to have a very modest and moral society that they wanted to promote, and that's what they did. And a lot of people then followed suit, because what the royals did, other people were either expected to do or wanted to emulate. If someone was going to cover up, it's because, well, maybe they were of a particular religion that said that they should, or because they were trying to protect themselves from sunburn, which sunscreen had not been invented yet. That's a very real thing that is uncomfortable and you want to protect yourself from. But it's not modesty for modesty's sake, purely at this time. But sometimes we project backwards ideals from the Victorian age in the 1800s back to people in the 1600s, which was not the case, as evident by my fashionable dress. But long gloves were very popular. They would be used when going out and even while dancing. And for fashion, for looks, could be to protect the skin, to protect the dresses from just oily touch of your hands. But long gloves were very popular in the 1700s and into the early 1800s in Regency society, and then they got shorter and shorter and shorter until the 1860s, where they were just wrist length, and then they went back up the arm in the 1870s, 1880s, 1890s, and that is because, at least in America, we were celebrating our 100th year of independence as being the nation of America, independent from the rule of Great Britain. And therefore, things that were in fashion, that were popular at the time of the nation's founding, came back into style during the 1870s. One of those being long gloves. You can see there's a lot of influence in American fashion in the 1880s from the 1770s and 1780s. So that is a fun little historical tidbit of fashion recycling itself and becoming popular again. Now, before I go out, I do have a nice pearl necklace here that I'm going to put on. And I'm also going to put on my shoes. So necklaces at this time would be used to fill up the neckline of my dress, which I have a very large one. So pearl necklaces could be used. Usually they would be much more grand than just a strand, but this is what I have for today to demonstrate the purpose. They also would have very large gemstones. This is all about opulence, display of wealth. Hairstyles would just get bigger and bigger and bigger. It was not usually popular to wear your own hair. You would wear a wig most of the time. And you would have a wig. You could then have feathers and birds and bird cages and tiny models of ships that would go into your hair. Just ridiculous things, or things that we would think of ridiculous today, but just it would get, hair got so tall and skirts got so wide, and it was just the epitome of more is more is more is more is more. And that is the Rococo period, the mid 1700s. It gets, in my opinion, pretty ridiculous with the display of wealth, especially in the French court. Of course, then you have the Revolution, and these types of dresses go out of style very quickly because this is what the aristocracy wore. And when the aristocracy is getting guillotined, you don't want to look like them. There is a revolution of new ideas, of equality, of brotherhood, and a new revolutionary style that goes with it, embracing of Greek ideals and really Greek fashion. Greek and Roman fashion come back into play. Skirts just go to very column-like dresses, and what we think of Jane Austen heroines wearing is what comes into style, which is a very stark contrast between this, which is popular in the 1780s. It's on its way out in the 1780s, but people might still wear something like this. And then in 1810, you have all of this fabric has gone away. It's a very straight silhouette. All of the frills are gone. And it's just a very interesting transition in that revolutionary era of fashion. So I'm going to go ahead and put on my shoes. My shoes are mules. And they're called mules. They have a little heel. These are made of a red brocade with gold flowers and a little braided trim across the top of my foot. They have no back, and that's what makes them mules. They have a nice leather sole. So these would probably be more like house slippers, or if I'm just going out into the garden, I might wear these. I probably would not wear these to town on dirty streets, but if I'm just getting into my carriage so then get out at my friend's house, I might wear these. Mules would be worn to town, but they would be of a leather variety. They come in different types of fabric. but I like these because they go with my dress. Of course, matching was not as much of a concern for people in this time period. You wore what you had, and sometimes they would have statement shoes that were a complete different color than their dress. That would be drawn attention to them. But I have some modern sensibilities that make its way into my historical style. Of course, it's perfectly fine if your shoes match. If it's what you have, it's what you have. But well, thank you so much for watching today. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about fashion in the, I almost said 1800s. So thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about fashion in the 18th century. I know I certainly enjoyed getting dressed up and sharing this creation with all of you. It's quite a fun outfit. So until next time, stay safe and take care. Thank you so much for being a member of the Northeast Georgia History Center. We truly appreciate it. And if you would like to go above and beyond and help us reach our May donation goal, the link is in the description box. Thank you.